Good afternoon and welcome. This webinar is a collaboration between the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, CFBNP, and the VBA Office of Survivors Assistance. My name is Trulesta Pauling. I will be your moderator this afternoon. Everyone's phone has been muted. If you have a question during the presentation today, please type it in the Q&A box on the right of your screen. I will read the questions at the end of the presentation, and the presenter will provide a response. This presentation will be made available to everyone that joined for this webinar today. This is a live recording. I would like to thank Ms. Ann Duff for this collaboration. We are grateful for your time today. But before we get started, I would like to introduce Reverend Conrad Washington, Director of the VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Reverend Washington retired from the United States Marine Corps with 20 years of active duty service with a combat tour in 2004 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom II. Reverend Washington is an ordained non-denominational minister in the Christian faith and actively serving. He received his Master's degree of Divinity in Pastoral Studies from Moody Theological Seminary, Master of Arts in Business Management from the University of Redlands, and a Bachelor of Science degree in Education from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. Mr. Washington? Mr. Washington? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move forward. Mr. Washington is trying to come on right now. There you go. There you go, Mr. Washington.
Good afternoon. Thank you, True. As we do this every month, 3 to 4 times, you think I would have it down. I do. Everything froze on me, but I'm back here. And thank you all for joining us and appreciate your patience there. Hey, this is the Center for Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships, and we do this again every month. Excited that you all joined us. We want to thank our presenter today, Ms. Ann Duff, a longtime colleague here in the VA. We appreciate you. So glad that you took time, ma'am, to share with us about the Office of Survivors Assistance. I want to let everyone know that we do this outreach consisting of webinars. We also do in-person events, and we have something called Veteran Ministry, a welcome center that we would love for you to be a part of across the nation. So if you want us to come to your area, your neighborhood, your community, you have an opportunity to reach out and request us to come. We can get as many folks as we can in the facility that you provide. We would love to extend VA resources to you and your community. With that being said, I'm going to be quiet. I hope that you all enjoy this presentation. But I will add a couple of things I almost forgot there. This office was created by reestablished by the current Biden-Harris administration. And I want to share with you that we have other colleagues in the federal government with offices of faith-based. So please look for that as well. And again, enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. At this time, I would like to introduce Ms. Ann Duff, who will be our presenter for today. Please read a summary of her bio on the screen. Ms. Duff is the Assistant Director of the Office of Survivor Assistance, Pension and Fiduciary Service. Pension and Fiduciary Service is aligned within the Veterans Benefit Administration, and its mission is to honor the sacrifices of the nation's veterans by innovatively delivering accurate and timely pension, fiduciary, and survivor-related benefits and services. Ms. Duff is a graduate of the University of Maine and Western Governors University, where she earned degrees in political science and instructional systems design. At this time, I give you Ms.
We don't have to talk anymore about me, please.
At this time, I give you Ms. Ann Duff for today's presentation. Ms. Duff?
Thank you. Thank you. So as Celesta mentioned, my name is Ann Duff, and I am the Director of the Office of Survivor Assistance. And And what we're going to go over, somewhat quickly today is the bulk of the benefits that are available for survivors. I welcome your questions, and we will do our best to get through them by the end of the presentation. So with that, I will start. So basically, you all may know this, but I will explain. The VA consists of three big administrations. There's the Veterans Health Administration, there's the Veterans Benefit Administration, and then there's the National Cemetery Administration. And all those three administrations fall under the umbrella of VA. So there are benefits under each of those administrations. And the Office of Survivor Assistance sort of is the overall expert on what's available. We are not involved in the processing of the benefits. We're not involved in the decision making, but we are the information experts. So again, we'll go over a quick summary of the NCA, the burial benefits, CHAMP VA, which would fall under VHA, and then we'll go a little more deeply into some of the benefits that fall under the Veterans Benefit Administration, because those are often what people are most interested in. So basically, burial and memorial benefits, any veteran who receives anything but a dishonorable discharge pretty much is eligible for a burial in a state or national cemetery. If you are a surviving spouse of such a veteran, you may be buried with that veteran at the time of your passing. And if the spouse passes first, the spouse can be buried prior to the veteran passing. So again, 155 national cemeteries, several state cemeteries, and this is really a very good option. The VA will supply one memorial flag to the family. It's often presented during memorial honors, but if for some reason the veteran doesn't actually have a military funeral, the surviving family can apply for that flag if they want it. The Presidential Memorial Certificate is this very fancy little certificate that is signed by the current president that just honors the memory of service members. And, families can order as many copies as they want of that. The burial flag is limited to one, but with the memorial certificate, you can order, 20 or 30 copies, and perhaps there are, nieces and nephews and aunts and uncles and siblings who maybe would want one of those, and that is always available for the family when the veteran passes. Some veterans are eligible for a burial allowance. It is not designed to pay the cost of the funeral. It's simply to help offset that cost a little bit, because while the burial benefits include the actual opening of the grave and the burial of the veteran, and then the closing of the grave and the headstone, the services that you get from the funeral home, the sort of preparation of the body, that is paid for by the family. So the eligibility is related to whether or not the veteran is receiving benefits from the VA, and additionally, whether or not it is a service-connected death for the veteran. The VA also offers, a lot of bereavement support. The bereavement support falls under the vet centers, which fall under VHA. I mentioned the three administrations. And so there is counseling available at all the vet centers for family members. So that's something that a lot of survivors don't know about, but we encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. So real quickly, CHAMP VA is a civilian medical insurance, very similar to TRICARE for those of you who are in the military, but essentially eligibility for that is very tied into the veterans disability rating for the family member. So if the veteran is rated at 100% service connected, permanent and total, then the family members, the spouse and the dependent children would also be eligible for CHAMP VA care. So this is also something that a lot of families don't know about, but we do encourage you to look into it. We can provide some additional information as needed. And as it mentions, if you are eligible for TRICARE, however, you are not eligible for CHAMP VA. Okay, so that's the quick down and dirty on the National Cemetery Administration benefits, as well as the VHA benefits. And again, if you have any questions about either one of those, go ahead and put those in the chat, and I'd be glad to answer them as best I can. One thing that I skipped over real quickly was we do encourage veterans to apply prior to their death for their eligibility for burial at a national cemetery, because it actually makes things a little bit easier for your surviving family. There is an application online, and it's called a pre-need eligibility. And you sort of put in your military information, you provide that to NCA, and they, in 6 to 8 weeks, they sort of turn that back around to you and say, yes, indeed, you are eligible, or no, you are not eligible. And while that does not reserve a place for you in a specific cemetery, because of course that is very dependent on what is available at the time, it does guarantee that you are eligible for buried at a national or state cemetery. So let's talk about dependency and indemnity compensation. This is a monthly tax-free benefit that is provided to the surviving spouse and dependent children if a veteran passes of a service-connected injury or illness. If there are dependent children, the minimum amount is right around $1,600, and that generally will go up with COLA. And the key there is that the death has to be connected to that service-connected disability. The veteran doesn't have to be 100% service-connected. It can be really any percentage, but the death needs to be related to that service. So for example, if you have a veteran who, when he leaves the military, it's noted that he has high blood pressure. 35 years down the line, let's just say he passes of a heart attack, and that can be easily connected to his high blood pressure. So that, even though, let's say the high blood pressure is just rated at 20% because it's manageable by medication. So it's not deemed 100% or totally disabling, but it's there, and the VA has said that it was related to his or her military service. Well, if that veteran passes of a heart attack, then that family, that surviving spouse, would be eligible for DIC, or dependency and indemnity compensation. So, and the process, when the veteran passes, there's a process to apply. The form number is listed on the slides, and I understand you'll be getting a copy of these afterwards. So this is very important. You need to, apply for this. You have up to a year after the veteran passes to have the award dated back to the month after the veteran passes. So again, let me give you an example. A veteran passes in February. And it's a surprise, maybe she was not ill, so it takes the family a little bit to actually apply for benefits. As long as that family applies for benefits before February of the following year, if they're deemed eligible, that DIC will be paid back till March of the year that the veteran passes. So that's just good to know. Dependent children don't necessarily have to be living with the veteran at the time of their passing. Many veterans have more than one spouse or more than one child that may be living with a former spouse. Although the former spouse is not eligible for benefits, you have to have been married to the veteran at the time of his or her death to be eligible. Dependent children under the age of 18 would still be eligible for benefits. That's important to know. Children's DIC, I mentioned this. Children over the age of 18, if they're full-time students, can continue to receive DIC. And one thing that's important to know about this piece is when we talk about enrolled in school, it's not necessarily university or college, but if you are in an accredited training program, and the VA has thousands and thousands of accredited programs, the child is still eligible to receive the DIC through age 18. Parents are sometimes eligible for dependency and indemnity compensation. This depends, again, on whether or not the death was service connected, as well as financial need. So often parents, a veteran may have supported his or her parents, and when that veteran passes, again, based on eligibility, and like I said, it's very income based, the parents may be eligible for dependency and indemnity compensation. And that is, again, the value, unlike the surviving spouse and dependent children, it's not a set amount. It is very much related to your income. Okay, the other big monetary benefit that is available for surviving spouses in particular is a survivor's pension. And this is available for a certain low-income surviving spouses of veterans who had wartime service. And the VA has very specific dates of what was considered a wartime period versus a peacetime period. And I did mention low income, so it's very much based on the income. The maximum income is set by Congress. The VA does not have any control over that. The Congress sets, as long as your annual income is below this certain amount, you may be eligible for the survivor's pension. Medical expenses that are not reimbursed can be used to bring down the accountable income. However, Social Security income will count against the income. So it's nice to know it's there. And again, you have to have wartime service to be eligible for that. Okay, let's talk about another benefit for surviving spouses and children, and that is a DEA, the Dependents Education Assistance. So if the veteran is 100% service connected, or if he or she passes of a service connected injury or illness, again, the surviving spouse and dependent children are eligible for education benefits from the VA. This is a huge benefit because this is, the survivor's opportunity to, again, maybe get that advanced degree, or maybe, if you already have an advanced degree, or what you want, to take a training in something else. I know someone recently who went to mortuary school. I know a surviving spouse who went to the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, because she always wanted to learn how to cook. So it's 36 months of benefits. And for college, they go for the 9-month school year. So it actually covers 4 years of college. But again, that 36 months is key. And again, does not necessarily have to be university education. Certain children and spouses are eligible for the Marine Gunnery Sergeant John David Fry Scholarship. So this is a little bit of a better benefit than this just straight up DEA. And often spouses or children will have to choose if you're going to take the Fry or you're going to take DEA. Again, it sort of depends on what your plans are, and there are plenty of calculators and advisors who can help you choose what the best option for you is. And one thing that I forgot to add early on is every financial benefit that comes from the VA is tax exempt. So you will never get a 1099 or any sort of tax document, because all the benefits that the VA has are tax exempt. Another option is this home loan guarantee. So again, this is for surviving spouses who are receiving DIC. Any of you who are veterans or know anything about the Veterans Home Loan program know that you can often waive the funding fee. There's often no down payment required. And again, a surviving spouse who is receiving DIC is also eligible for this benefit. So this is very important. And then, during the COVID time period, there were a lot of assistance available for people who are having trouble make their payment. And if you have a VA loan, that is absolutely where you should go if you start having any challenges, because the VA has lots of programs to assist you with that. Okay, some other benefits, and services. Of course, you can. There's a preference in federal employment. There is life insurance available for surviving spouses when the service member passes on active duty. If you are the recipient of if you are a beneficiary of the life insurance that the VA offers for both active duty and veterans, you are eligible for financial counseling. And then the other thing that we always like to mention is that every state has a whole myriad of benefits that are available for veterans as well as survivors. So we always suggest that you take a look at what your state offers. Several states are particularly veteran friendly, but all of them offer something. And this comes into great importance when it comes to property tax, because a lot of states will offer at least property tax relief if you are the surviving spouse of a veteran. So again, we do not keep we just can't keep track of all the different state benefits, but we encourage you to look at them, and we can provide for you a website that you can go to see what sort of benefits your state offers. Oh, this is it right here. I'm sorry. This is available state benefits. So if you this is the actual benefit, but the actual website. But if you just Google or whatever your browser is, if you say My Army Benefits, this will come up. You do not have to have a PAC card to take a look at this. You open this up and it shows a picture of the United States and every single state. And you just click on your state and it tells you all the different benefits. And like I said, there are hunting licenses, or admission to state parks, all sorts of different things. But again, it's not owned by the VA. They're owned by the states, and we really don't track all the different variances. Okay, that is the quick down and dirty of VA Office of Survivor Assistance. Again, I mentioned that we are here to answer your questions, and here is our, the Office of Survivors is an email address that my team and I manage. We will answer any question that comes in there that we can assist. Sometimes, it takes more than an hour to give you an answer, but we will give you, if we don't know the answer, we will get right back to you. But we, as the information experts, we encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions, and we will get you an answer. So I'll stop there. And I will stand by for your questions. I'm going to turn it back over to you, True.
Thank you, Ms. Duff. I appreciate that wealth of information. I'm sure our audience do as well. Now we're going to address questions in the Q&A box. I will read the questions out loud and we will ask you to provide a response. Some of the questions, the sentencing, the structure is not correct, so we bear with me as we get through this. For the questions that we do not get around to today, we will provide those questions to you directly and ask for you to reach back out to the person that asked that question directly. We do not need to see the responses. We have everyone's email address and point of contact information so we can get that information to you. Okay,
Absolutely.
our first question is coming from Ms. Kanisha. Her question is, and for the purpose of reading out these names and questions is for the folks that called in on the phone that are not at their computers, but they can hear what the question is and they can hear the response. Kanisha asked, what is the maximum amount which can be contributed to offset funeral costs for the National Cemetery and State Cemetery? Any criteria to qualify for said benefits?
Yes. If the death is service connected, the payout is $2,000. And then the VA will also pay transportation expenses. So let's just say, the veteran passed in a hospital and there's a cost for the funeral home to pick the veteran up at the hospital and get them to the funeral home. We will cover the cost of that. For a non-service connected death, so, whether it's service connected or non-service connected, the VA will pay $948 is the burial allowance. Now, the plot allowance for a private cemetery, so if for some reason a veteran is buried at a private cemetery, then the VA will also pay up to $948 for that. And again, the big distinguishing factor in that is the service connected versus non-service connected. So, Kanisha, I hope that answered your question. If not, toss in another one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanisha, for that question. The second question comes from Julie King. Where can we find the information at the VHA as a survivor of a veteran? So where can she go to get information from the VHA? Is there a website? Is there a link? We can
if you go to our website, the survivors website that is on this particular slide, there are links to the VA to the VHA benefits. You can also throw that into your again into your browser or Google, and just Champ VA will bring up probably the information that you need, or it will get you to the site that you need.
Thank you, Ms. Duff, and thank you, Ms. King, for that question. Our next question comes from Annie Way. My claim for my husband's death has been in for 4 months. What is the standard wait time for benefits?
The answer is it depends. So, sometimes we come across situations that are very clear. So if the veteran was 100% service connected and he or she passes, the VA is working to try to make some of those claims just automatic. And I have seen in records as we've checked them to when people inquire, the burial claim can be paid, in 2 weeks or sometimes even automatically. It will take longer when the VA, when the cases are a little bit murkier. So let's just say, going back to one of my examples, if the veteran was 10% service connected for hypertension, and then, like I said, many, many years later passes of a heart attack, the VA has to determine whether the death was service connected or not before they can pay that burial allowance. And generally what the VA does is, they'll get the claim for burial allowance, they'll get the claim for DIC, and those will be decided at the same time once they've done all the research for whether it was service connected or not in those cases when it's not clear. So that often does take longer. If that is not the case with your particular situation, please drop an email to our Office of Survivors email address and we can take a deeper look into it. But, I will say that because of the PACT Act and lots of other things, claim adjudication is taking a long time, and they will generally keep that burial claim with the other claims. Something that happens, another thing that often happens is if a veteran passes while he or she has a claim in for themselves, the surviving spouse has a year to request to become a substitute claimant. And that is yet another thing that will just add time to the final decision, because, we want to make sure that, once the decision is made, that all the amounts are paid out to the survivors. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, again, drop us an email and we can get some more information from you. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Duff, for answering Mrs. Way's question. Next question comes from Nicole M. Is there a CHAMP VA locator for nearby facilities? I have a veteran who was asking about CHAMP VA, and I am new to this topic in our CBOC. I heard that they do not accept spouses under this.
Okay, that's a couple questions as near as I can tell. If you want to find out where there are VHA or VBA locations, again, that's another Google search, or if you're on the VA website, you can just say VA locations and it will come up for you by state, all the locations, whether it's a vet center or a clinic or a major hospital or a regional office, all that information will come up. As far as the question about spouses not being eligible, as I mentioned, the veteran has to be 100% permanent and total for the spouse or the dependent children to be eligible for CHAMP VA benefits. Over.
Thank you, Ms. Nicole, for that question. And thank you, Ms. Duff, for that response. Our next question comes from Cheryl Tolan. Upon remarriage and loss of TRICARE, is CHAMP VA available to that surviving spouse?
Champ VA would be available for the surviving spouse if the second marriage ends. So if your active duty spouse passed, you maintain your TRICARE eligibility until you remarry. Now, that's only as long as if you remarry prior to the age of 55, because if you remarry after 55, you get to maintain your benefits. So you have a second marriage, you have lost your TRICARE. If that second marriage ends, you can now apply for Champ VA. Over.
Thank you, Ms. Tolan, for your question. Our next question comes from Joan Tillett. I believe this is, excuse me if I mispronounced this, Gentilesco. Joan Gentilesco. I would like to know what the approximate turnaround time to hear about my Champ VA status. I submitted the form approximately 8 weeks ago. My husband was the veteran and he was 100% disabled and it was service connected. Thank you.
Again, going back to, another related answer, it depends. Again, he would have had to be 100% service connected, permanent and total. That permanent and total is really key with the Champ VA. Generally, it takes 8 to 10 weeks for those things to be adjudicated, but a lot of times it depends on how much, if the VA in general needs to get more information from you. Again, send us an email if you'd like us to take a deeper look into that, or I know Champ VA does have a number that you can call, and they would also be more than glad to assist you with checking the status of that application. Over.
Thank you so much, Ms. Joan, for your question. Our next question comes from Craig. What is the burial eligibility form?
Are you asking, Craig, if you're asking for the pre-need eligibility form number, I think it was on my slide, but I'm going to look it up real quickly for you. It is a VA form 20. No. I was going to say, you can actually apply online. It's a VA form 40-10007.
Okay, you might want to repeat that one more time and stuff.
Actually, it's 40-10007. So 10,007. And again, you can find that on a VA website, or you can also Google or use whatever browser you have. Over.
Thank you very much. Next quick question comes from Kanisha again. What is the maximum amount which can be contributed to offset funeral costs for national cemetery and state cemetery? And I believe you answered this already, Ms. Duff, but any criteria to qualify for said benefits? I believe you answered that question already.
I believe I did, but service connected
Go ahead.
2,000, non-service connected 948.
Thank you so much. We are moving right along here. Another question from Kanisha. With COVID and long COVID impacts, how is this considered in relation to SC percentage at time of death. For example, SC at 40% for COPD, but cause of death related to COVID. Might you be able to speak on this somewhat gray area?
Not really. Simply because, you know, COVID is not considered, necessarily a service-connected disability. So example, if you have someone though, let's just say, they are service-connected for COPD, and then they pass of COVID on that death certificate, it would probably say pneumonia as a result of COVID-19, and a significant contributor would have been the COPD. I will say, I do know that the VA, if any veteran passes of COVID, they will do a deep dive into the record to see if there was any sort of service connection that somehow could have contributed to that. And that COPD actually would absolutely be something like that. Or if the veteran had some sort of, lung cancer, or, but again, our office we're not involved in the decision-making process. So we cannot tell you yes or no, but again, we do look for that some sort of service-connected disability that could have led to a COVID death or a COVID passing. Over.
Thank you. Question 10 comes from Marquita. Is DIC tax exempt?
Yes, all VA benefits are tax exempt. Over.
Thank you so much, Marquita, for that question. Our next question comes from June Gavin. If you are a caregiver, wife of a spouse that is 100% TNP, would the caregiver/wife receive DIC, or does it still need to be a service-connected death?
If a veteran is 100% service connected for at least 10 years, no matter what the cause of death is, the surviving spouse is eligible for DIC. So if a surviving spouse is a caregiver for a veteran who is 100%, and I would imagine 99 times out of 100, the cause of that veteran's death would be related to whatever he was service connected for. So in that case, yes, the surviving spouse who was a caregiver is now a survivor, would be eligible for DIC. But remember, DIC eligibility doesn't even come into play until you are a survivor and the veteran has passed. John, I hope that answers your question. If not, you can ask me a follow-on or send us an email. Over.
Thank you so much, Ms. Duff. Our next question comes from Allison Bauer. So the surviving education, the veteran just has to be 100%, not 100% PNT. But the census just not quite understand what she means by that. So I'm not sure how you can answer that. We can try to get a answer back to her. We'll provide you her name, and maybe she can clarify what she's asking.
Absolutely.
And the next question comes from Lisa LaChapelle. What do spouses of retired vets get? So I think that's kind of
a retired veteran has the same requirements to be eligible for the surviving spouse to be eligible for benefits from the VA, the veteran, whether he or she is a retiree or not, has to pass of a service-connected injury or illness. Of course, military retirees are eligible for SBP, which is the Survivor's Benefit Program. That is paid from the Department of Defense, and that is something that a military retiree signs up for when he or she retires. So those are two completely separate benefits. In the past, there was an offset that you could not receive SBP from DFAS and DIC from VA, but that has gone away. So now a retiree, the spouse of a military retiree who passes of a service-connected injury or illness would be eligible for their SBP that the retiree signed up for when they retired, as well as DIC, which is a benefit related to the service-connected injury or illness. I will tell you that SBP from DFAS is taxable. DIC from VA is not. Over.
Thank you so much for that response, Ms. Duff. Our next question, we have a few more minutes. Gary Hollowells asked the question, can you speak to the PACT Act and survivor benefits for those survivors passed away before its passage?
Absolutely. So, what the PACT Act did not change any benefits for survivors. What it actually did was create more potential survivors. So, for example, if a Vietnam veteran passed of, let's say, coronary artery disease in 2007, and he never applied for benefits from the VA, if there is a surviving spouse, that surviving spouse can apply for DIC based on the veteran passing of an Agent Orange presumptive illness. Now, of course, the records need to show that that veteran served boots on ground in Vietnam, or if, a Navy veteran in the blue or brown waters of the Vietnam area. But if you have that Vietnam service, and the PACT Act expanded that to air bases in Thailand, as well as some locations in Guam. If you served in that one of those areas during the period of the Vietnam War, or I think the periods are actually a little bit longer in Guam, even if the veteran never applied for benefits, that survivor can apply for benefits. And then now the survivor can apply for DIC. What the survivor cannot apply for is the disability compensation that the veteran may have applied for but never did. So the eligibility for the service-connected disability ends when the veteran passes. The DIC, or the survivor's pension, is a completely different benefit that eligibility starts up when the veteran passes. So that's what the PACT Act did. It just really opened the opportunity for a lot more, from the survivor perspective. It opened a lot more opportunities for survivors to apply for benefits. I hope that answers your question. If not, let us know.
Thank you, Mr. Hollowell, for that question. It was a good question. Ashton Stewart asked the next question. How does surviving families apply for a flag if they do not have a funeral service / military honors?
There is a form for that, and just a moment, let me look up that for you.
And for the folks that are asking for these forms, Ms. Duff, we can provide you their email so you can.
Okay. Yeah, it's very easy to get the application. It's a 27-2008, and you can take it to your local your post. You can check online. Most post offices carry these flags, and you turn in the application and they will issue you the flag. There are some smaller post offices that do not have them. So we always recommend just checking at the Postal Service online to see if, you know, your local branch has flags. You just have to take that application in with the required documentation and just pick up the flag at the post office. Over.
Thank you. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. The next question comes from Al Kelly. Do any of my retirement pay transfer / continues to my surviving spouse?
Again, Al, that is a question of whether or not you signed up for the Survivor's Benefit Program when you retired. And that is a DOD or DFAS question. But if you signed up for it, your surviving spouse can get up to 55% of your retired pay. If it so happens that you were not married at the time that you retired and you did not sign up for it, and now you are married, you can reach out to DFAS, and because of a major life event, you can sign up for SBP. Over.
Thank you. Ashton Stewart asked another question. Does a couple have to be married for at least 1 year to be considered for DIC?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And this is more to protect from, you know, fraud. You know, if you have perhaps a unscrupulous someone who finds an old veteran and marries him, you know, a week before he passes in order to get the benefits, that is really to keep that from happening. So yes, there is a year requirement. Over.
Thank you. Michael Skinner asked, was aid and attendance included in these benefits, and who or what is the requirement?
Aid and attendance is an additional benefit on top of either DIC or the survivor's pension. And basically, it's an additional stipend of about $300 that can be added to either one of those awards based on the survivor's need for additional assistance in the home. There's a set criteria of things that a survivor is not able to do in their home. The form is signed by their medical professional, and then the VA will add that additional $300. I think it's about $300 to either the DIC or the aid and attendance. The survivor's pension benefit. A survivor cannot receive aid and attendance unless they're receiving one of the other two benefits. So you can't just apply for aid and attendance. You have to apply for DIC and be eligible, or apply for the survivor's pension and be eligible, and that aid and attendance can be tacked onto that. Over.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Skinner. Next question comes from T. I was told by a VA representative that the veteran who is 100% disabled and did not die from a service-related cause for the surviving spouse to receive DIC, but had to be at 100% for at least 10 years. Is this false?
So two questions there. If a veteran is 100% service connected for at least 10 years, then no matter what the cause of death, the surviving spouse is eligible for benefits. If a veteran's cause of death can be related to their service-connected disability, no matter what percentage it was, the survivor is also eligible for benefits. So the way the question was asked, I would say it is false, but again, I can answer that in words, in email words better if you would prefer that. Over.
Thank you. Next question, and this will be the last question. And as I mentioned earlier, for all of you that have asked additional questions, we will get them to Ms. Duff's office, and she will get a response back to you. We have your email address and we will be able to get you a response. Al Kelly asked this last question. Any assistance for cremation of the veteran if they don't plan on interment in a cemetery?
Absolutely. That burial benefit, to be eligible for the burial benefit, the veteran does not have to be, it does not have to be an in-ground cremation. I mean, in-ground internment. Again, whether the veteran is cremated and, left on your, and the family keeps the veteran's remains with them, or the veteran's remains are put in a uh, cemetery that it takes cremains, you are still eligible for that burial allowance based on the eligibility that I talked about earlier. Over.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Duff, for that wealth of information and for sharing all of that. We thank you so much for this webinar today. As you can see, we've got so many more questions to get answered, and we will get them to you. As you can see, Ms. Duff's point of contact information is on the screen, and you can reach out to her team as well for any additional information that you like. Also, we will have our team point of contact information coming up on the screen as well. And feel free to reach out to us at any time. At this time, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Mr. Washington for closing remarks.
Hey, thanks, True. Look, I just want to thank you, Ann, for taking time. We had a lot of questions, but that's a testament to such a great topic and such a great presenter. So thank you again for taking time. And Chalesu and the team will get you the remainder of the questions. And thank all of you for joining us. We appreciate you. Please subscribe so you can get more alerts from our office. So thank you and be blessed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duff and Mr. Scott on the line. If you registered for this event, we will provide you with today's presentation. A recording of this webinar will be provided on our website at a later date. Please subscribe to our website and Facebook for future webinars and information. This adjourns today's webinar. Thank you for joining us today, and goodbye. Have a great day.